And the main objective of the Social Travel Summit is to really bring bloggers and industry together to discuss the issues impacting influence marketing or working with bloggers and come up with ways of working more effectively together and achieving greater results together. And part of the Social Travel Summit is the think tank that we organize. So in this think tank, we basically lock up 30 people, so 15 industry, usually marketing executives, and from tourism boards and brands, and 15 professional travel bloggers. We give them 3 issues to discuss in 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and all their discussions are recorded and they are then presented, and then they have to come up with recommendations or solutions to the issues, and then that's all compiled into a think tank report. And this year,
it's very, very valuable. It's amazing to read. It's really, right people.
If you'd like to read past reports, go to thesocialtravelsummit.com/think tank. But Peter will come on up, Peter, Elena, and Becky. So Peter Jordan has done a fantastic job moderating the think tank for the past 2 years, and together with the topic leaders, Becky Enright and Elena Pashinger, they will present to you the report from the think tank of 2017.
Official handover there, Keith. Thank you very much.
Oh, glass of water.
Take a seat.
Yeah, take a seat.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think was happy hour announced at the bar there or something? I think a lot of people escaped. Well, we have the honour of taking the final slot here at the Inspire Theatre in WTM. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. As Keith mentioned, I had the honour of facilitating this year's think tank and also last year's think tank for the Social Travel Summit. It's a summit for elite travel bloggers in the world, and we also bring together a huge amount of wealth of knowledge of the travel industry, so DMOs from mainly Europe, but increasingly beyond Europe too. Now, this year we were in Kitzbühel. Did I pronounce that correctly, Elena? Kitzbühel. It's right up in the Austrian Alps. There may or may not have been some lederhosen. And dirndls, of course. There were photos, but we won't be sharing those photos with you this afternoon. But yeah, what I wanted to do then is just go in a bit deeper to the subjects that Keith and Melvin were talking about there, and share with you some of the latest insights that the travel bloggers have brought us. I mean, remember, travel bloggers are people who travel all year round. They're on the road all the time. They're picking up ideas from all over the place. And this can transfer into really valuable knowledge. So this is something that we wanted to capture for the benefit of the wider travel industry. So let's see. We have located. I hope we've got good eyesight because the screen's over there.
Over here.
Okay. Let me just first of all introduce myself. My name is Peter Jordan, and I have a travel industry news blog called Gen Z Traveller, and I am head of insights at Toposophy, which you've probably heard of. And I'd like to introduce Becky Enright, who runs her own blog, Borders of Adventure. Becky's going to explain a little bit more about that as we go through the conversation this afternoon, and I'm very pleased to be joined also by Elena Pashinger, who runs Creative Elena from her own initiative and immense skills in blogging. Becky and Elena were the topic leaders, and the third topic leader was Emma Mead from Visit Britain, who unfortunately couldn't join us this afternoon, but I'll be very happy to cover the subjects that she talked about. Just to tell you a little bit more about what I do, these are the areas that I work in. I'm a consultant in strategy and research in the travel industry, and if you're interested to know a bit more about any of these particular subjects, I'd be very happy to talk to you later. So, the Social Travel Summit think tank, as I mentioned. What is it? It's exploring the way that we can improve the relationship between travel influencers and the global travel industry. As we know, this is an area which is expanding very rapidly. It's in constant evolution. Especially, it goes along with the waves of changes in social media, but there's a huge amount of learning going on all sides here. And so what we wanted to do in this particular forum was capture the views and the insights and some of the problems, some of the solutions that people are seeing as they travel, and capture them in one place and share them with you free of charge through a report, which I finished just a few weeks ago. It's been designed and we've been pleased to release it this week. What are some of the subjects then we've talked about in past social travel summits? Because this is the fourth one. This is the fourth edition of the Social Travel Summit. We've talked about, I've got to have a good memory here because I can't see.
Yeah, I can't see.
We've looked at over the challenge of over-tourism. We've looked at how the ethics of blogging as well, how you run a blog responsibly, all kinds of different subjects that have been covered in the past reports. So if you'd like to know anything about those particular subjects, I invite you, all of the reports are in one place on this particular website, on this particular webpage, thesocialtravelsummit.com/think-tank. You can also find the Code of Ethics, which was written in 2014, but is still extremely relevant. And that's something to which I think some of the best bloggers adhere to. So this year, as every year, we covered 3 particular subjects, which we selected in advance and we shared with people in advance of the summit so that they could start putting some ideas together. What were the 3 topics then? The first one. Thank you very much. Here we go. That's more like it. That's brilliant. I don't need binoculars now. How to put together the perfect visit. Well, this is something which we talk about, I think, all the time. You've heard about that from Keith and Melvin before. But rather than make an exhaustive list of what to do when a blogger comes to visit, or an influencer comes to visit your destination, what we wanted to find out was what are some of the most recent ideas that have come out of that particular experience. We wanted to find out also, in the second topic, when influencers go beyond content. So what are they doing more, apart from producing content, what are they doing more of in destinations and how can they support their clients better? And then finally, we looked at destination crisis and recovery. It's a particularly hot topic this year and increasingly in recent years. So we wanted to get to the bottom of finding out if and when influencers may have a role in helping destinations through recovery. So I'd just like to give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to invite Becky to explain more about what we found in this first particular topic. Putting together the perfect visit. Well, as we know, this is kind of the crux of the matter, isn't it? It's the most essential point in the relationship between the influencer and the destination that they're visiting. It's, of course, essential for producing the right content, and it's essential for allowing influencers to add their particularly star quality or magic touch, the things that really differentiate them from other media. So, Becky, what did we find?
So I think when we speak of influencer trips, we still talk about a press trip or a fam trip, when in fact it's completely different to the traditional press model of a trip. I always call it a campaign trip. I think it's very, very different, and that's where it kind of gets a bit confused sometimes in terms of how DMOs can work with bloggers. What happens with that approach is it's very cookie cutter, it's very old school traditional, and it's the method that's used for traditional press. So tends to be that a lot is packed into a small space of time to fit normally what a journalist would cover, which is quite listicle and throwing everything into an article. And when it comes to influencers, everyone has a different niche, everyone has a different voice, and that is one of the benefits, as we've spoken about before, of working with influencers. And so really every single itinerary or every single trip needs to be tailored, and you can't use that you know, we have this standard press trip, go on it. One person described it as what happens is a drive-by shooting approach where so much is packed into an itinerary that you're in the car, you stop off somewhere, you take a picture, and so on. And that's what the day is like, and it's completely packed, and it doesn't give that influencer the chance to really find their voice or their story.
You've done this before. What do you find that happens when you have this sort of, as it's known, drive-by shooting, where you jump out of a bus, take photos, and jump back on again? What's ultimately the result from that? What happens?
One, you're not finding you're not delving into your personal passions of that destination or your particular topic, whether it be culture, history, adventure, or so on. Secondly, if you are with a group of people, all of you are getting the exact same content, which means both on social media and on the blogs, all of the articles are very much the same, even when you have different niche bloggers on the same bus or in the same car. So it's just not giving anybody the flexibility to be original or unique. And that is the benefit of working with influencers, is that every single person is different. And this is what we need to draw out by really streamlining how we put together an itinerary. One of these things is about free time. So the problem at the moment is we don't have a lot of free time, as Melvin mentioned previously. It's really important not just that we have half an hour or an hour to upload onto social media, but that we have half a day even just to go out into the city or whatever we're doing in that destination to find our own story. That every blogger goes and does their own thing, maybe some pair up so they get, the pictures of each other and so forth. But it really is important that we find our own unique story. And that could mean combining it with activities that everybody's doing at the same time, like 3 or 4 of us. Sometimes
I found it really interesting how sometimes some of the best stories and some of the most interesting things come from a moment when you don't have your minder with you, or you don't have necessarily the local guides, but you're free to wander. But I guess there is a worry on behalf of the destinations that they think, well, hang on, I'm paying for someone just to wander about.
And they don't think that free time is an activity when essentially it is, because it's not the activity that they have provided, but you are finding your own activities. So free time is really, really important. And I found most of my trips now, we are able to manage to squeeze in a half day, like free time. Normally we do a lot of our, social media updating just before dinner or when we get back or in the evening or when it works. But at least half a day is really essential. And for me, I can run around a city quite quickly. It's not the most ideal situation, but that's when you start meeting the local people, when you have random conversations on the street, when you walk into a cafe, when you go and eat at a restaurant, you have your own time to even choose your own food, because that's another thing that we talked about too, is, sometimes, of course, the DMO is very excited, that wants you to see everything and wants you to go to this amazing restaurant, but sometimes that restaurant doesn't fit that influencer's niche or the audience.
They were saying sometimes a meal can take about 3 hours in itself, which is quite a long time when you've got a lot to pack into 2 days.
And sometimes we can just, we might want some street food and then we can carry on with our half day of freedom. So it's really important now that we start to factor in with the DMOs and actually speak up and say, we absolutely need that free time. It is not wasted. You are not paying for empty time. You're paying for us to find our unique story. And what results of that is a very unique article. Your money's gone to good use.
So you mentioned just briefly meeting the locals. It's something that came up quite a lot there.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've been doing for the last year in Austria as well, tied in with that, because you've been meeting quite a lot of locals, haven't you?
Yeah, so I'm British, but I live in Austria, and I travelled for 2 years, and then I became an expat in Athens, and I did some work there to change the perception of Athens. My kind of niche is perception changing, whether it's seasonality or bad reputations and so forth. Then I moved to Vienna, and after 6 months I approached the Austrian Tourism Board to be their ambassador to the UK. And what I've been doing is once a month I visit a different part of Austria. My approach was to visit all 9 states in all 4 seasons, and to gather all range of activities, adventure, cultural insights, sometimes touch upon the food and festivals and things. Yeah.
You've been an ambassador, not so much in the Ferrero Rocher kind of context, but more in the... everything. In everything,
yeah. I mean, I try to uncover the stories I need, and that's what they do for me. I worked with them for 2 years prior to this. They know me, I know them very well. The itineraries come through, they fit. I have my free time. I have the things that they want covered. We work with the regional tourism boards, and obviously we have to cater to their needs as well, and everything fits.
But I'm interested in the fact that it's quite a long campaign, so it gives you the space and the time to really show off.
To really immerse in that culture of the country.
And Eleanor, you are Austrian.
I am.
How do you think she's been doing? How do you think she's been doing in terms of meeting the locals and showing off your country?
Becky has been an invaluable asset to the Austrian national tourism industry, and I'm very proud of her and the entire idea of the campaign. And I believe she's already touching upon the issues I'm going to talk to you about, which basically centers around longevity and trust. They completely trust her, like she says. They've been working together for 2 years previous, and also it's a long, long campaign that really opens up the time slots and the need for Becky as well to have her really particular interaction with some of the locals that can be very different from Tyrol to Vienna all the way. They're quite a variety.
Right. So I just want to run through then some of the quick checklist of some of the practical considerations then when it comes to arranging this perfect influencer visit. Becky, perhaps you just want to talk us quickly through them.
Yeah, I think just to touch upon this concept of trust and longevity, it's really important that both the influencer can go to the DMO and vice versa and highlight any problems. And that's during the kind of conceptualization of the idea before the trip, during it and after. This is an absolutely professional relationship that often comes down to contractual agreements. Things have to be delivered, and we need to ensure that everyone has what they need to deliver all of those, the deliverables. So
that's an important
it's
point.
It's a negotiation, yeah.
I think a lot of people came into this, obviously from perhaps an amateur point of view. It's an interest which they had that took off. But of course, we're getting into a working relationship, a business relationship here, often with a government authority who have their processes and need to do things very carefully. So I guess that's one of the lessons that we've been trying to put across, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course, it's normally government money, and we have to be careful how it's spent. But a trip is never a holiday. It's a work. It's a contractual agreement, and we all have to keep that in mind because we both need to have the time to do our research. We obviously want to have fun on that trip because I think with all of this, the rushed nature of press trips, as I said in the think tank, we are writing for travellers, but we are not travelling like travellers. So it's finding that balance of, this trip was fun and I found everything I needed, but I also need to get my deliverables. So this is a negotiation that really needs to take place beforehand, and as an agreement, I think we were talking about there possibly being a grace period where we've noticed that some bloggers, some of the not so professional ones, they wouldn't open an itinerary until the night before on the trip. And by that point, it's too late to troubleshoot or to change anything in the itinerary.
There's a particularly powerful quote which one of our delegates shared with us, and she just put it so simply and so well. That influencers, if you have a problem with the itinerary during or after a visit, because people moan about it after and they say, it didn't go with my audience and didn't work, and it's too late. It's too late for us to do anything about it.
And the worst thing is you might have a blogger who has moaned about something or the DMO hasn't done something, and then that blogger turns around and says, I can't write your story. And then you have no coverage. And that is the worst case scenario that you do not want. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of lessons being learned there, though. So this doesn't always happen this way, fortunately. But I think
it's a week or two before, I think, it's really important I personally go through an itinerary. I go onto the website of the regional partners. I double check that there's not any extra activities that regional partner can provide or what's in that destination. If there is, I go back to, say, Austria and say, but, there's this other water sport or there's this other activity I can do. Can we fit this in? But that's, as far in advance as I possibly can do that because it can take, there might be one time slot for you to do that activity. If I tell them there and then, I'm not going to do it at all. So
I think it's something which is definitely a lesson which is coming out. We've got to understand also that the people arranging these itineraries don't always have the luxury of a couple of weeks, a relaxed couple of weeks to put it together and submit it 2 weeks in advance and see if it works or not. We totally understand that, which is why even just a meeting when you arrive, surely, that's also a really good...
like 10 minutes. I think there seems to be a fear with some bloggers. I don't want to spend hours at dinner with the DMO, but sometimes it can be a quick 10 minutes. They want to see your face, get to know your personality. That's really, really important, face-to-face meetings. And troubleshoot anything there and then if it needs to happen, and be on your way. And 10-15 minutes is nothing in the grand scheme of your time on the ground.
I think those are some very valuable lessons that have already come out from that first topic. So I'd like to move then on to the second topic, which Elena handled extremely capably because she has actually a huge amount of experience in this area herself. I just wanted to give then a little bit of context before moving into what we learnt here, and I'll ask Elena to walk us through that. Clearly, as we all know, that life is changing for DMOs. That's very clear. But it's also a message that we wanted to reinforce to all of the bloggers who were present at the Social Travel Summit. I put together this list. It's not an exhaustive list, but we asked, of the things that worry DMOs of destinations, worrying about travel bloggers is really not a huge priority. It doesn't necessarily keep them awake at night. So what are the things that keep DMOs awake at night? And I actually found that some of the DMOs present in the room, they said, oh, finally someone's understood what's really going on in our life here. There's all sorts of different things that a DMO is increasingly being required to do that pull them perhaps away from their marketing tasks and more towards managing their destination. Managing all kinds of things like managing overcrowding, obviously the ongoing concern for increasing visitor spending as well, and spreading it around more evenly around the destination. Integrating collaborative economy, things like that are increasingly becoming a bit of a headache also. Ensuring the long-term sustainability. So there's long and short-term things happening there. But what we decided to do, in amongst all of these big headaches, was single one out and look in particular at this increasingly important task for DMOs, which is carrying out training and coordinating product development. So, they're increasingly having to roll up their sleeves and get involved locally in teaching certain skills, improving skill sets among local business owners, helping them with particular situations. And so with that in mind, perhaps, Eleni, you actually, apart from producing some wonderful content yourself, you actually get involved in some of this yourself. So I wonder if you could just explain what you found then as a result of your work. Because we weren't even sure if it was happening, but we discovered that it really is already happening, isn't it?
So thank you all for still being here with us, and thank you for your attention. My role was to quiz all the delegates about areas that they went into beyond simply participating in a blog trip, in a destination. And we found that actually a lot of things are happening already. My own personal background is I'm a tourism management graduate, so I do a lot of consultancy, all the way from local tourism boards to the EU level. So yes, the answer is this is also happening at very much institutional levels, this type of cooperation and support. And among all the delegates that we had at STS in Kitzbühel in Tyrol, we found those answers that you can see on the screen. So let me explain and provide you with a bit of context around those. So micro-conferences, what do we mean by micro-conferences? Very often, getting tourism boards and influencers, bloggers together results in a type of micro-conference format or atmosphere whereby knowledge is being shared, and not just knowledge across the table, a sort of, do you like it here? Oh yes, I do. Actually, professional advice and professional knowledge is being shared. And I find, and I get a lot of feedback that increasingly on behalf of influencers, they will agree to participate in a certain trip knowing that other influencers with business advice, with expert knowledge in a particular niche will participate, because it leads to the entire group giving each other consultancy. So this kind of roundtables and conferences do very much exist. One of them mentioned that she's actually a mystery guest. She's actually enrolled in a professional program around being a mystery guest. So she will use trips, certain trips, to report back to this additional income or industry that she pursues. Also, based on our experience, we provide creative advice, management advice on campaigns that you cannot find in a guidebook. You cannot find this in a study degree or course program. You can only find this by doing what you do 5 years on the road, 7 years on the road. So some of us, I've been in business doing this for almost 7 years. My travel blog is 5 years old now. So there's a lot of advice, not only myself, but most of us can bring to the table.
So, yeah, I mean, it's got to be said, something we learned already from many of the people seated around the tables in the think tank is people said, but I don't want to do this. I'm happy with my blog. It's going well. But at least it's food for thought as a way of a means of business development. And I think it also helps open the eyes in destinations to seeing some of the potential going beyond just producing content. But it's also got to be said that, it's not for everybody, and not everybody necessarily has the confidence or the background to walk into a classroom and start teaching about, running a workshop and things like that. It's not for the faint-hearted. You also, of course, have to know perhaps the local language. You've got to know the business culture as well, how that works as well. But we want, for those that really are interested, for both sides, we were interested to know, well, how do you make this work? What are some of the key things you need to bear in mind?
I mean, very true. A lot of it has to do with a kind of sensitivity towards the intercultural dialogue and the business atmosphere in different countries, different areas. And I agree, it's not for everybody. But certain elements of this kind of new professionalizing relations very much are for everybody, because, and again, pointing towards what we found, it's in everybody's interest to be able to demonstrate results and to demonstrate a proven track record. And I think that's something that everybody literally can start working from. And to have a business portfolio in terms of a media kit that is well done. Now there's so many examples of that already existing. I think that's very important. And trust, you cannot buy trust, you cannot fake trust. Trust only builds up over time, and time really works for you.
I think we found, for example, that there were, when bloggers had come back for a second or a third visit, obviously they knew the destination better, they felt more up to date and familiar with what they were finding there. They allowed them to build up that reputation. Of course, it's not really the case that someone's just going to turn up on the first day, never having visited a destination, and start dishing out advice. I mean, we know that influencers are good at dishing out advice. That's very true. But to structure it in a certain way takes some skills, doesn't it? Yeah.
No, I very much agree.
So if you're an influencer then, and this is something that interests you, what do you think are some of the things that they really need to bear in mind?
As an influencer, and again, this relates to the entire culture of yourself, presenting yourself on the phone, through email, on the spot. You need to remember that you're actually acting on behalf of your entire industry as well, to some degree. Like, you cannot just choose not to care because it falls back on everybody else. At least that's what we're trying to teach and advance in terms of professionalizing these kind of media relations. Yes. There's a certain need to look at long-term goals, and I know we're talking repeat visits, where this tends to happen more often, and where this kind of formal advice tends to happen more often. But essentially, it can start from one trip. Do your homework, do your paperwork. Exactly what we said before, and also in the previous session. And demonstrate results. People are very keen to learn of previous case studies and why they worked. Really, even if you say, okay, it's not for me to be a formal consultant, they still like to hear your story and why you've been successful with a particular client, with a particular destination. And I think going beyond content, really the ultimate thing is that you feed trust in the entire industry, of influencers working together with the travel industry, something that we haven't seen 5 or even 10 years ago in this way.
Becky, I know that you've sometimes done this type of work. I wonder if you've got any comments about some of the things we've discussed.
Well, it's very much, I think Elena's touched upon it. I'm from a PR background, so I think about 13 years in PR, I've been blogging for about 6. So I actually tend to find that not only do I bring in the elements of place branding into my blog work, which kind of forms my niche, that this consulting role is very much welcomed and is needed, because we are the people on the ground, we are the people who have travelled for many years, and we are consistently travelling. So yes, it is very much about the professionalism. Everything does come back on our industry. We're a very saturated industry. There's hundreds and thousands of bloggers. I don't even know what the number is now.
One of the important things that came out of the keynote that most struck me when in the summit was that there is more content already out there than can ever actually be consumed. So that makes everybody...
So helping people to hone that in a professional sense and give them guidance about the best ways to work with people, about, talking to them about changes in tourism footfall and being strategic. Like, we can give them the strategy, not just the content. And that's what's really important. It's actually quite fun as well. Like, I mean, we love this, but this was our job before, and we've managed to keep it as a part of our job now as bloggers. Yeah.
Which is a wonderful thing to do. So Becky just mentioned there, just briefly in her comments, about the fact that we're teaching about what else is going on in the tourism industry, because I think very often when you're panicking about doing a particular trip and you're planning just a few weeks ahead, you really have time to stop and think about what else is going on in the travel industry and perhaps the wider context in which we're operating. And that's why in the Social Travel Summit Think Tank, we've done our best to bring in a new topic every year, something which is not really so much to do in the way that bloggers are working and sort of helping them improve that relationship, but perhaps looking at a new area, a new particular challenge for the tourism industry. Last year we looked at over-tourism, and we questioned whether bloggers could perhaps help in some ways about reducing seasonality, in perhaps there's a role for them in education, in educating visitors. This year, of course, we decided to look at a particularly hot topic, and this is the one of crisis and recovery. Now, unfortunately, increasing number of destinations have faced scenes like this. This is a scene from Barcelona earlier in this summer, but unfortunately, increasing number of European cities in particular have faced terrorist attacks in the last few years and have found an urgent need to rebuild their reputation, to encourage people to come back. It's not easy, it doesn't always work the same way in every single market, but increasing number of destinations sadly have found themselves in this situation. But of course it's not just terrorist attacks which can befall a destination. And it was very interesting to find that some of the destinations present at the summit were not all city destinations. We've got many rural destinations, we've got beach, sun and beach destinations too. And it's quite interesting when you start talking about these issues. People say, oh, well, you know, we're a quiet destination, nothing's really happened. You know, we don't sort of expect this to happen to us. But, well, you know, it's not, of course, the terrorist attack is not the only thing that can occur. We've already seen just in the last couple of years things like the Zika virus, natural disasters. Look at what's happened in the Caribbean just over the end of this summer. Look at even in how Houston was affected by hurricanes and floods. Then, of course, political, let's call them revolutions, perhaps tarnishes to a country's image, perhaps, or things which cause concern for people as well, crime waves and cyber attacks. Now, we don't necessarily expect influencers to come and solve all of these issues, if only if it was that easy. But we did actually start to discover, what we did was we just put this subject on the table and we asked people, what do you think? How have you seen this work? Because some of the destinations had seen crises of their own. So this is a subject which I'm just going to cover, but I think I'd be interested to get your views on this also. Well, what we discovered, as I said, is there is a role for influencers here. There is a role in, as I said, crisis communications. So there's in the moment of crisis, they can help perhaps to spread the official news when, and this is an experience that we found from Visit Britain that shared with us, and the moment of a crisis occurs, for example, a terrorist attack, there is a very narrow channel that official advice and news comes from. So we automatically revert to following the news from the police, for example. Now, if an influencer does have a particular relationship with a destination, and they have a lot of audience that's popular, that enjoys that destination, well, it may well come in use, it may come in handy if they're able to share that particular news. Then we look at recovery, and this is, I think, where there's far more relevance for a role of an influencer. This is where you go from crisis communications to simply trying to stop any panic spreading and increase loss of life, and you move on to the actual process of recovery, to giving people the confidence to come back to your destination. The moment when you need to attract visitors, tell the story of recovery, which is quite interesting in itself, and of course show the real situation on the ground. And sometimes influencers are better at this than the media as well. So, what did we find? Well, we really asked DMOs, first of all, to think that if they were feeling perhaps a bit complacent, what we really wanted to hammer home here was that they really need to start thinking about this, wherever you come from. And now is the time to start thinking about who you're going to put in your recovery coalition. So start talking now to your local partners before something happens. And then finally, it's important to include influencers. Currently, let's say, standard media channels are on your communication list, but why not influencers too, if you have a close relationship with them and if they can help you out? And then we asked this thorny question, what about paying in that moment of crisis? Well, it was quite interesting to find that our influencers unanimously said, we want to help our friends out in a time of need. So if they need, if they need a service from us, which is as simple as reposting our content from a while ago, or sharing owned content already, content from a previous visit, or perhaps a collection of photos that were taken that were not used, well, they'd be welcome to use it, so long as just there's a bit of communication there. However, if there's a new campaign, and you want new content and a new visit, well, it's only reasonable that those things should be paid for. I'm just interested to see if you've got any reflection on that particular subject.
Well, as you know, it's a subject that's close to my heart, and it kind of underpins a lot of what I do. I travel to places sometimes that are deemed extreme, and my whole point is to tell people that they're not. I'm very much that there's a bias in media. We need to move away from that. Mainstream media is never really going to move away from its bias. That's how it makes its money. So we are the people to change that. And, I've gone to places like Iran and said to people, it's not dangerous. I'm very much like the people are not their governments. I touch upon, I don't go deep into politics, but I touch upon the subject in order to allow that destination to shine outside of its political troubles. So I think, it's very important that when we're on the ground, we're not just there to do things, to-do lists. Sometimes that works for some people's websites, but really we're there to tell a story, and whether that's through local people, whether that's by saying, hey, this is a post-conflict destination and it's fine now, look at the nature, look at the food, look at the people. We are the storytellers that can really overshadow this media bias and be the more important voice. People do want the media facts and what's happening, but you see this trouble. Someone will say Kiev, and their images are of all the fires and the crowds in the square, and you go there now and it's completely peaceful and fine. And even with what's happening in Catalonia with Spain, you go there, you don't actually see anything.
I was going to say...
Because you have this focus on those images, and you go there and there's a flag here, there's a flag there, and people have their voice, but it's not happening in the same way.
I'm actually finishing writing an ebook with the destination Costa Brava, and I'm going to do it in Girona actually towards the end of the year. And it's going to show a face of the destination. It's going to say, hey, it's not dangerous to travel through Barcelona to Girona at the moment, and it's going to tell a pre-Christmas story about the destination as well. So there's lots of things involved, and I think...
It is always tricky, though, because it is possible, of course, to wade into deep water with that question of obviously what's happening in Catalonia at the moment. But looking, for example, many bloggers were very clear about the fact that where there had been a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, you've also, of course, got to be very careful not to just be blasé about it and try and breeze past the fact that if there's been loss of life or injury there, you can't just turn up and pretend that everything's fantastic.
Not use it as link bait either.
That's right. But there is a value there, though. Of course, I'm fascinated by this, telling the real story on the ground. And some people even talked about live feeds in the think tank. They talked about the usefulness of being able to show to your followers in a very quick and easy way what's really happening on the ground, because where it's highly concentrated. Yeah.
And I think that's it's reflective of how social media works. When the war in Syria started, we actually followed it more on Twitter than we probably did in the newspapers, because we were following people who were escaping and moving. And we're reflecting that. We're just doing it in a different way. We're on the ground spreading a different message, but it's normally post-crisis, post-conflict.
Well, with that in mind, and I think we're doing pretty well for time, but I just wanted to share with you then, you can go into a lot more detail, and you can read about all of the advice and information that we've talked about this afternoon, and go a lot further into it by downloading the report, which was released earlier this week. It's a free report, and you can find it at thesocialtravelsummit.com/think-tank. All kinds of practical advice on managing that relationship between destinations and influencers. But I just wanted to check if we have any questions from the audience. I know some people have been submitting them online, and maybe we have people in the audience here. Just wanted to check if we've received any. Been stunned. Thinking of happy hour, I think. Yeah, lady down here. I'll repeat your question once you've got it so everyone can hear it. Yeah. Yeah. How do you find what, sorry?
How do you find the right influencers?
That's a good question. So the lady asked, thank you very much, first of all, for highlighting the real challenges that we face as a destination. And sort of some of the real more longer-term headaches, I suppose. And the question was, how do you find the right influencers for my destination? That's a long, very good question. What would you say to that, Becky?
Well, the obvious answer for us is you come to people like us on the professional level. You come to iAmbassador. We have a database of bloggers, of professionals, of different niches, different target markets, different demographics. We exist as a professional body to help with this situation. If you want to, I know some people like to reach out in an individual sense, and that's when it gets really difficult, when there's so many hundreds of blogs. But I think it's very easy to, with groups like us to see who's at the top of their game, who is the quality bloggers, and start there. And if you do want to approach them individually, then you can see, you know, when we work for these professional bodies, and then of course if you do want to do something collective, we exist as that body. So that's the start.
Some of the answers to that question are also in some of the previous reports as well. We talk about how to find a blogger that works for you. When we say do your homework, of course we would say to bloggers, do your homework before you arrive in a destination, but it's also really worth just spending time looking out there to see who fits well.
Yeah, I mean, I was working with bloggers way back in the day when mummy bloggers and food bloggers were becoming big, and parenting blogs, and I spent hours reading them and their bios and to see who was quality, and that does get really tiring for you guys. You can't sit and read 200 blogs. But I do find that, because I'm still looking at some blogs for some of my PR clients, because I still do a little bit of that on the side, and there is sometimes an immediate sense of whether that person's quality by the look of their blog, by their bio. Like, are they immediately saying who they are and what their niche is? Or are they just saying, oh, I'm just here to influence people to travel? And that's not a niche, you know, so...
Look to networks and professional bodies for support. Like in our case, there's a network of Austrian travel bloggers, and the Austrian National Tourism Board actually sort of endorses the professional people in the industry. So I think that's also important, not to miss the sort of institutional support that you can get, because in most countries these days, yes, the tourism organizations will at least have a few names handy, and if you start contacting them, we know each other. So if you start with Becky, if you start with me, I will be able to tell you in your language or geographical area that you're working, I will be able to refer you to the good ones in terms of the professional ones, the ones that really look at it as a business exchange.
And just a point on that is that a lot of the core sort of European countries especially have their own kind of small collectives, and most of those people are actually in iAmbassador, but just in terms of if you wanted to work with one market, there is a core group of UK bloggers, there is a core group of German bloggers, and it's just a fact of networking with the...
It also gives you a certain degree of assurance there, because there's some professionalisation involved, and there's a certain set of standards involved as well. Wondered if there's any more questions. Gentlemen, oh, they have a microphone. Brilliant.
Oh, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, you talked about finding bloggers for the DMOs. What about startups and startups which want to cover a global scale? How do you go for them?
I think it's a similar formula, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you come to things like WTM and you're networking, I mean, you meet so many people just at a 2-hour drinks do, you know, and that's one of the best ways as well, because then someone's always going to say, oh, you should meet my friend Peter, or you should meet this person, and it's just an immediate pass on to the right person when we can't help you with it.
I've got to say, also at the summit itself, we've had an increasing number of people from the private sector coming as well, not just always public organisations, not just always destinations, but people from other travel brands as well. So it's not an exclusive thing just for destinations, it's people who are interested in travel that want to come and find out more. So yeah. Any other questions at all this afternoon? Well, yeah. Thank you very much then for joining us this afternoon. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I invite you to download the report and find out more. Thank you very much. Thank you.